I'm Dr. Sophia Omoro, owner and designer at Annabel. Thank you once again for joining us for our docuseries, Conversations with Annabel Beyond the Beautiful Things. Today we welcome Sunny as he speaks with Annabel about what wearable art is and whether this can be used to promote cultural, racial, and gender inclusivity. And as always, please stay to the end for my wrap up. See you soon.
Sunny Dolat, you are easily one of the best dressed, not just men, but people I know in Kenya. I know you don't care for that kind of praise, but I'm gonna give it to you anyways. According to CNN Style, Sunny, you are ushering a new age of Kenyan fashion. There's a considered way you style yourself and your visual projects in all African products that gives off a sense of pride for where you're from and shows an almost spiritual reverence for African fashion design in general. As one of Kenya's most inspired creative directors and stylists, it's really an honor to have you here with us to share your insights, Sunny. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. That's a very kind introduction.
All true though, Sunny. This topic of wearable art, to be honest, I'm not super well versed in, and that's why I'm actually really excited to have you elaborate on this topic of wearable art and what exactly it is.
That's one of the things that's very unique about fashion, is that it's kind of the only art form that you can have on your body. You know, you can listen to music, you can look at a painting, you can look at a piece of sculpture, but fashion and clothing are the only things that you can actually put on your body. I think that this idea of wearable art is very subjective, because what you consider wearable art would be very different from what I consider wearable art. And I don't think that wearable art is limited and locked within the world of couture. I think you can find it anywhere and everywhere. One of the brands that I've been really intrigued by recently is a Kenyan streetwear brand called Metamorphosized. They have this one t-shirt in particular that I find so interesting. So the front of it says, "We are delicate, not like flowers, but like bombs." A couple of months ago, there's a photo of a police officer who was like beating a protester and had now raised his foot to kind of step on him. And that was like pretty much like the front page of every single paper. It was used a lot when we were talking about police brutality in Kenya. And so that photo is screen printed at the back of the t-shirt. And I really like that t-shirt because I think that it says many things about police brutality, about where Kenyan youth are, and by extension, I think the youth of the world. And so for me, in a sense, that's a piece of wearable art, you know?
I mean, how appropriate right now, right? To layer on politics onto a simple t-shirt. So just, a graphic design on a t-shirt, how much value that t-shirt goes from being just a garment to something that can really, activate change in some way, inform people, make people, awakened to a different way of being. So that's pretty powerful.
It is. And on the other side, you have a kind of higher end designer like Katungulu Mwendwa, who for me does such interesting things and makes such interesting decisions around construction, where she will move a seam from where it traditionally should be. And for me, those kind of like technical interventions are so interesting and make garments.
Special.
But they definitely do need someone who has some sort of technical knowledge, because then you're able to see, the kind of sleeve detail on this jacket that Annabel is wearing is so interesting. Then you're able to really appreciate that.
I'm in Ada Omo. This is one of the blouses that she's made, and it has this sort of Victorian referencing. I think this fabric is actually imported from Europe, but I'll show you my outfit later. Thanks, Sunny. But yeah, you're right. The details, the devil is really in the details, right? And sometimes these special details are really the value that you get in these clothes. What do those details mean? Why did the designer, what were their intentions in creating that detail?
I think that with every single piece of clothing that a designer makes, they're saying something, either about themselves, or the kind of like context that they're existing in. One of the designers whose approach to the making of clothes that I've really, really been enjoying the past couple of years is Tebe. And I was so blown away with his new collection, where he's created this print from the fingerprints of a spy who worked during the apartheid era. And I think that Tebe has this really beautiful ability to carry and to move these really heavy and potent stories into his garments, you know. In that moment, for me, it goes beyond being just a dress.
So these are all the layers that we really look for in conscious fashion.
Absolutely. And I think that at the point at which now a customer has bought the garment and is wearing it, then we have an added layer of expression, because people also wear clothes very differently. Some people have a bit more awareness about what they're wearing and what it's saying. And some people wear things because they appeal to them aesthetically.
Taking it then to street level, this idea of the interpretive quality of clothes and how powerful that can be. Being Kenyan, it often feels like you're never given the space or allowed to actually do that, to express yourself through, you know, how you look, the clothes you wear, because society kind of gives us these very narrow definitions based on, you know, our profile, you know, whether we're light skin, dark skin, whether we're, you know, old, young, whether we're big or small, whether we're, you know, whatever gender we are. There are these very narrowly defined ideas about how we should dress, you know. No mini skirts, for example. In Nairobi, you can, like as a woman, to wear short shorts or a mini skirt in Nairobi is it's just a no-no. Nobody even talks about it. It's just, we all know that as a woman you can't do that. But if I go to Joburg, I can do that. Can you elaborate on that and let us know when we can be free from this subjugation? Because for real, like, where does this come from, and how can we finally get away from this? It almost feels like a Let me let you speak.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, you asked where it comes from. The British
Colonization.
It's it's really plain and simple. Because if you think about it, this heavy policing of dress is a very kind of British/colonial introduction to Kenyan society, to African societies. Because when you look at many traditional communities that still wear traditional dress, nudity has never been a big thing, like the showing of bare breasts, the wearing of loincloths. And both for men and women, you look at like the Dinka in Sudan and the corset that they wear, it covers only their midsection. Their backsides and their genitals are all out. But then it's not sexualized. But when the British came and when the missionaries came, because what they did was very similar, because the missionaries really laid the foundation for the British to come. And the missionaries were the first people to start to really police cultural expression and to start to bring in respectability politics and all these very Western ideas of morality. I always say that fashion is particularly cruel to women because fashion profits so much off of the policing of women's bodies.
Correct.
And demanding that women keep up with this really absurd pace of being trendy. Because when you look at what is expected of women when it comes to dress and what's expected of men, it's so different. With every single issue that comes out every month, fashion magazines will tell you that this month, to be in, to be cool, to be hot, this is the silhouette and this is the trouser you need to wear. This is the, and anything that you had previously is completely out of date. Absolutely. And I'm like, how? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And when you look at the way that the fashion industry speaks to men, it's the complete opposite. You'll see a lot of talk of classics, and there isn't the same kind of expectation to be on trend. And so bring it back here. I think Kenya is a very complex country because there's this whole idea of respectability and morality, whereby we are so fixated on being respectable that that's really the only thing that people will focus on, and it's the thing that is the most heaviest policed, right?
Yeah, we look forward to a time where, Nairobi can join the ranks of, I know we're a long way of Paris, New York, Copenhagen, as being, a street style capitals of the world. Not the way they do it, but the way we do it. Based on, the resources we have available to us, based on our, the references that are relevant to us. And I know that it seems like it's bleak, but I think there can be, with these kind of conversations, we can really drive people to really think about how they consume fashion and to really sort of motivate them.
I actually don't think it's bleak at all, because there's, I think our generation, sadly, we still carry a lot of respectability politics because we don't want to shame our parents. There's all of these things that we still carry. But then the generation after us don't carry the same kind of baggage. And so for me, it's so interesting to see this kind of sartorial expression of this new generation who are not tied into this very rigid idea of what gender is, for instance.
Yeah.
And I think you and I, for instance, have talked about, like, when you go for thrift social, for instance, which is a very young crowd, but the things that generation is doing with dress is so interesting for me, because even the idea of masculinity has been completely torn apart. Right? Yeah, so you find men who identify as heterosexual, cis men wearing, I don't know, like all these layers of jewelry, sometimes even wearing dresses. And that for me is so interesting, because that is a start of a sort of liberation around the expression of gender.
We hope to see that kind of, as you say, sartorial expression, to move away from these closed sort of niche events and onto the street, right? So that we then become part of a global conversation. We then become somehow relevant and interconnected with everything else that's happening around the world. And we get to show that, our power of expression is as powerful as anywhere else in the world, whether it be the US or in Europe.
The thing with fashion and clothing on the continent is that historically it's always been such an integral part of identity, of our identity, and that because of the nonsense of colonialism and the erasure that came with that, a lot of African countries were really disconnected from their cultural dress, from their traditional dress. And I don't think there's a better example than Kenya, where when you look at it, there was such a deep erasure of cultural dress and cultural heritage assets.
So people always say how fashion takes itself way too seriously, whether it's Western fashion or even African fashion, especially now where people have, more important things to think about given everything that's happening. And those more important things are really just basic survival needs. What do you think are the qualities about African fashion in particular that make it actually quite necessary right now?
Our cultural heritage, like any society's cultural heritage, is the soul of that people. And I think that kind of modernization doesn't necessarily mean that, suddenly we're all wearing COS, for instance, but that our cultures and our cultural heritage must also evolve and be relevant for whatever time we're living in. And so for me, that's what's really interesting about the exploration by African designers, is that every single designer is exploring what it means at that given time to be African, to be Black, to be, maybe even whatever ethnic group they belong to. And so I think that it's really, really important. And especially at a time like this where all of us as Africans are, I don't want to say re-energized, but there's definitely
There's renewed opportunity, right?
and also growing esteem, because I also think that historically what happened is that as Black people, as African people, we were always told over and over again that somehow we were lesser than. And that's something that we've all been deeply interrogating and fighting over many, many years. And this esteem is growing more and more. And I suppose even the ego is also, this kind of like collective ego is also growing. And it's a really amazing time because the opportunity to kind of build and grow this identity is, I don't think, something that I don't know if I'll see it again in my lifetime.
Exactly.
And so this kind of like building is important because for me as a Kenyan, as an African, I'm very aware that whenever I occupy public space, the ability to carry my identity with me is something that's very important to me. And as someone who has access to a number of platforms, my dress choices then start to become very political. Yes. And so I think that there's many people who are really embracing their Africanness, their Blackness, and want to be able to share that with the world. And clothing is a really kind of integral part as to how you do that.
I 100% agree. I mean, fashion can really be literally a vehicle for change, Once you put meaning on those clothes can then create, a cultural movement that can really shift how we were thinking before all this happened and where we'll be when it's all said and done. Sunny, I could literally talk to you the entire day. I'm so grateful that you were able to come and, share your insights with us. And honestly, one day I'm going to grow up and be just like you. I promise.
Oh, come on now. I want to be just like you. What are you saying? Just
Sunny, thank you so much.
Thank you, Annabel. Have a lovely afternoon.
I hope you get some of the rest that you deserve.
Me too.
Thank you, sweetie. Thanks
so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sunny and Annabel, for taking us through this rather subtle but extremely powerful topic. The light, love, and positivity of fashion and clothing as a form of creative expression sometimes can be diminished when instead it's used for oppression or suppression. I do recognize that certain platforms, certain professions and roles do come with certain guidelines which include a dress decorum. However, when these guidelines instead are used as binding chains and wherein we start to classify or mock an individual because of what they wear, is where we go wrong. Thank you for joining us, and see you for the next one.